Alrighty. So my name is Alex, and I'm not Doctor, Mr., anyone. I'm a boy. I'm Catholic. I also struggle with faith very, very often because I'm a skeptic. But that's my own problem. I'm hyper-rational, and I do truly listen to people. I've watched every single person who's talked already, both sides, with vigor, truly. And I wasn't always involved much in the pro-life movement, mostly because I didn't know or hear about it, and I was a teen. But the more I heard, the more I cared. And I'll be honest, I use my heart and my mind, as was said beautifully by someone earlier today. And I understand to an extent why there is such a strong other side, the pro-choice present here. Because people always have motivation. Otherwise, they're here for something they don't care about. I've heard a lot today about how a heartbeat does not prove humanness, and how I've always heard how conception does not prove it, or in some way or another, how whatever stage does not prove it, And when I first learned of this movement for justice, both ways, I listened as a young person and took everything in. But one thing that always stood out to me, as people tried to explain how to prove the moment something can be called human, I simply just recalled to my years in high school. It was mentioned several hours ago that science has laws, and that the Supreme Court, even when they decided upon Roe v. Wade, was not able to make a definitive decision because they're not scientists. And yes, science has laws, just like governments have laws. But there is not a scientific law for everything. And for what there is not a scientific law for, there are scientific methods. And how to classify, how to affirm what something is, that there are methods for that too. And you can look back to what it was, what something was, hundreds, millions of years, you know what I'm talking about. You can look at what something is now, if there's enough physical material evidence. Or you can look at what it will become, which is what I understood, which is in that moment what made me pro-life. This may sound silly, but I would like to assure my sincerity, without sarcasm. At the point of conception, a woman's egg is not going to possibly become a human, or it's not going to possibly become a dog or a cat, causing it to have no human life definition. It will only become an adult human being over the course of 50 years until it dies. Therefore, from the moment of conception, the alive creation tissue, whatever you want to call it, being developed in the woman must be classified as a human creation. Now, an adult human life, or a child human life, or a baby human life, from the first stage of human life, must be classified as a human. 1, conceived human. 2, birthed human. 3, child human. 4, teenage human. 5, adult human. Even a deceased human is still called a human without a heartbeat. So listen to my story of a seed. Before we plant it, it is a seed. I would not call that a sunflower. I would not. But once the seed enters the dirt and is planted in the dirt, and you give it water and you give it sunlight, a small tiny bud sticks out, barely out of the seed. And we do not certainly say, oh, let me go water my unclassified plant tissue. No, but we do go out and we water our sunflower, because that's what it is, because that is what it was always intended to become. It is a sunflower, and we are watering a sunflower because we want the delicious sunflower seeds that I think are disgusting. But when it's done growing, it's 6 feet tall, and it's still a sunflower, and always will be. because that was God's purpose, and that's my belief. I'm Catholic. But we do not really need God to figure that simple logic out. I didn't have a strong faith when I was a teen. So I guess babies are too different or too complicated, for whatever reason, to not attribute it in the same way. But, okay, some testified just a while ago that, like I said, the Supreme Court said, we're not scientists, that's the best we can do. But it's not. We may not be scientists, but we know science, and we have learned what it means to be a human also in our daily lives outside of high school, which means we have personal needs. We will have emergencies and threats to life. There are threats to life, homeless walking around our streets in Providence and in other countries. And when it comes to us, when it comes to being out of our control, I mean, obviously, the threat of human life it's out of our control. But what about those moments when it is in our control? What about the weight of this undecided debate? It's not taxes, it's not education, but life, a human life dying, like the doctor said. Oh, maybe not. He didn't say it with a lot of vigor, but it was very profound. I will tell you one fact. One fact for sure. It is of my greatest suspicion. If abortion never existed in whatever parallel universe, what I mean is if it was not a question of gain, this personal and societal need for abortion, if it were not in existence, the question of humanity in these little babies would not be in question by anyone on the earth. We can testify about gruesome happenings on both sides, and we will cry, as we all have. But if we are going to establish laws based not on our emotions, not on a limited number of stories that make it to this hearing, and laws not based on anyone's personal gain, no matter what the vitality, if we are going to establish laws based on humanity, like we fought for, tooth and nail, so many years ago, then we must use our brains, not just our hearts. Our hearts can be deceived. Someone before testified and mentioned slavery. And as I sat in the room with the television screen, I saw many people, their faces shocked and appalled, or some of them laughing, but because they weren't really listening to an unbiased, simple example. And it was also said before me that our laws are meant to guarantee health and care. That's all. That's its only purpose. Saying this in a country that, yes, did fight to guarantee humanness to African Americans, that literally people sat back in a court and said, well, this thinking is absurd. What will farmers do? How will society function? And I just watched the Lincoln movie for the first time I don't know if anybody's seen it, and I know it's a director interpretation, but to somewhat it's historical, and scenes in the courtroom where both sides were genuinely frustrated over what to do, what decision to make, because it seemed obvious what the decision should be, but how it would dramatically impact society. But they made the right decision. I hope that we all will hope, everyone in this room, that the people who will decide for the rest of us humans outside of the womb, that you all will not, as it was said before, I'm quoting a lot, I know, cherry pick whose lives will be cared for. Just as abolished slavery will no longer be cherry picked for the sake of anyone, just as foreign superpowers will not cherry pick on Judaism for the sake of one. Representatives, I hope that even despite what I say, you will have the willingness to be unbiased, unattached, despite whatever you may feel, to meditate, and then to not hesitate to do what is right. God bless you.